part two of the worst record stores I have ever been in. Luckily for me, there's not a whole lot of bad experiences I've had inside of record stores. For the most part, record owners and employees seem to be pretty cool. Some of them are more of the quiet type, and outside of asking you if you need help with this or that, they don't really bother you too much. And I like those kind of um, store owners and employees. And then you got the real friendly ones that want to help you anything you need. I love those as well. For the most part, when I go into a store, I just want to dig. It's possible to have a few questions, this, that, or the other. But for the most part, it's just let me sit back and do my thing. So I'm happy to say that I don't have a ton of bad experiences, but if any more pop up in the future, which hopefully they will not, I'll definitely be sharing that with you. So the first experience I want to tell you about on this particular video goes a little something like this. Now, I've been a collector and a reseller for many years. Reselling since probably 2000, 2001, somewhere in there. As far as collecting, my whole entire life. So I remember going to the Compton swap meet. This is some years ago, and I had found they had like one of those old Pioneer mixers, like a DJ mixer. Not Pioneer, I'm sorry, Pyramid. Who remembers Pyramid mixers from like the 80s? So they had this like larger size Pyramid mixer, and I figured, oh, I'll pick this up. I don't remember how much I paid for it, 10 or 20 bucks, something like that. And I figure I'll just resell it. Somebody will definitely want to add this to their collection. So I bought it. I brought it home. I was a big eBay seller back in those days, and I put it on there, and I listed it probably a handful of times, and there was no interest. Nobody wanted it whatsoever. I think I set it aside for a little while. And then finally I was like, I got to get rid of this thing. I don't want it anymore. So I decided to just give it away. So I put it on the Craigslist free ads. And right away, somebody gave me a call. Some guy gave me a call. And he was like super excited. And he's like, yeah, I want it. Hold it for me. I'm coming to get it right now. Please don't give it away. I collect that kind of stuff. And he's just, going off about getting this mixer. And I'm like, all right, it's here. Come on through. So he and his wife come by and they pick it up. We get into a conversation. And it turns out that they are a retired couple and had recently moved to Phoenix, retired here in Phoenix from Queens, New York. And he's telling me that, they sell stuff and they have a store and they're business people and they move their whole business, here. So I'm not sure if that's what they did for a living in New York, but they just basically said they moved everything here, retired, and that's what they were doing. And they had this store. This was over in West Phoenix. So I said, cool, they gave me the address, and I don't recall exactly how long it took me before I went over there. Knowing me, I got over there pretty quick. So anyway, it was in this industrial park that was kind of like hidden in the back of these neighborhoods, which you see a lot here in Phoenix. So I go to this industrial park, and you know how those are. It's just like a row of storefronts, if you will, on each block. And I go inside the store, and I'm looking around, and it's like not a super big store, maybe like a maybe like a 20 by 30 room, something like that. And they had all these like little knickknacks. That's the best way I could describe them. It's like just these knickknacks, stuff you would see like at the flea market or something. Little toys and kitty trinkets and stuff like that. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, I know there's got to be more than this in here. When I walk in there, there's this like younger woman, and she's up there, and I'm looking around, and she's asking me if I need any help, and I asked about, the couple or whatever, and she said, "Oh yeah, hold on a second." So she goes in the back, and she comes back, or one of them comes out. I don't remember which one. I think it was the guy, and he's like, "Hey, blah blah blah." He's like, "Yeah, come on back, come on back." So I go into this back room, and it was like humongous. I go into this big, humongous room. It was probably half the size of like a high school gym. It was a big open space. And there was like just tons and tons. It looked like a humongous indoor rummage sale. That's what it looked like almost like a indoor flea market, but it's not like things were organized. It was just piles and of just everything in this big room, and I'm just like, whoa. I'm looking all around, and it's just like, man, so much to look at and so much to see, and it's not like you could just kind of browse. You had to, like, at that point, if you wanted to look at anything, you'd have to literally like dig through the stuff and open boxes and move stuff out of the way, and it was crazy. It was crazy in there. So he's all telling me about his business, this, that, and the other thing, and there were other smaller rooms inside of this big room, or attached to this big room, and those smaller rooms were probably like 30 by 50 foot size rooms. And I go in one room, and I just remember there was just a big huge pile of flat screen TVs. They weren't organized or in any kind. They were just literally like a pile, like a giant pile of flat screen TVs. And so as I'm looking through different rooms and stuff, or I'm noticing, okay, that's why they wanted this mixer. The guy didn't collect them or anything like that. He's just like reselling this stuff. Somebody gives you something free, they're just gonna take it and resell it, and I don't blame him. I didn't care. I didn't want that at that point anyway. But there was a lot of stuff in there. So they lead me back to this one room. And when I tell you there was like a wall, I mean like a big, huge wall of records in boxes, though. They were in boxes. You know those boxes, I guess you can get them at U-Haul or Home Depot or something, and they like fit records perfectly. You know what I mean? There was like tons and tons of boxes, and they were just like stacked up, kind of like in a pile, but stacked up and everywhere, and they were huge. There were so many that you couldn't even dig through them. It was like there was a few out in front that you had access to, but you couldn't, for the most part, you couldn't really dig them. They weren't in any type of order, rhyme or reason, or anything like that. And I'm just like, wow, this is something else. So the records that I had access to, which wasn't a ton, maybe 3-4 boxes or whatever. I think there was like a box of 45s, and I'm going through this stuff, and I'm not seeing anything, anything exciting at all. And I remember there was one record, I can't remember exactly what it was, and I'm not sure if it was, I think it was like a 12-inch single. It wasn't even a full-length album. And I asked, well, how much is this? and they're just kind of looking at it, and and I could tell right away they had no idea. They had no idea uh, what it was worth, who the artist was. They didn't have any idea about records in general. They just acquired all of these records, and somehow here they are. And so I think they quoted me like 10 or 12 bucks or something like that, which was ridiculous for what it was. If I wish I could remember what it was, but I can't. That was a while back. And so I was like, man, these people don't know what they're doing. And that's like some of the worst kind of resellers you have out there, are those that have, items or merchandise, whatever you want to call it, and they have no type of knowledge. I mean, not a clue of what it is, what it's worth. They've never looked at it. They just somehow acquired it. Now, this wasn't really a record store, to be honest with you. I mean, they definitely had a storefront where they were selling other stuff, and they made it seem like it was like a record store, but it was really just a indoor garage sale. I don't even know how they would advertise it, or if people had ever been in there before. You definitely, you know it's impossible to obviously see it from the street. No one would even be driving down that street unless they worked in that neighborhood or lived in that neighborhood. So, did they ever? I have no idea how people even had access. Maybe they were still working on it. I know to some extent it was a lot of that place was still a work in progress. Anyway, it wasn't looking good at this point. And so I just grabbed, I see these 45s, and I grabbed like an obvious, worthless 45, the type of 45 that you would see for $1 or less. Like the type of 45 that you wouldn't even take for free. You know what I mean? One of those worthless 45s. And I'm like, let me test them out. And I was like, how much is this record right here? And they looked at it. I think the guy looked at it for a few seconds, and he said $10. I said, okay, these people are nuts. They don't know what they're doing. Let me get up out of here. They don't know what. And I was like, well, it's kind of hard to dig through it. And they were like, yeah, I know. It's we apologize. I said, give us a week, and we're going to have all of this stuff organized and straightened out. Come back in a week, and it'll be all ready for you to look through. And I'm thinking, yeah, right. Anyway, so I was like, there's no way. I'm thinking there's no way that they would have all of this organized within a week. There's just no way. And then I was thinking, maybe I'll come back in a few weeks. Maybe I'll give them a little longer. So I was thinking maybe 3 weeks. I'd let 3 weeks go by. I'm thinking this as I'm driving home, and I just never had a good feeling about that place, and I never ended up going back. I was like, because after 1 week, I was like, there's no way. There's no way, that they're gonna be ready. It's an older couple. I didn't, young girl in the front. I didn't think anything was gonna happen with that, and I just kind of lost interest in it, and I never went back. I never called them again. I think I was kind of pulled into that, and it ended up just being a bust and a big waste of time. Not a big waste of time, but a waste of time, and I would have happily gone back after so much time if they had a clue of what they were actually doing. Now, if you want to charge me $10 for a record, $12 for a record, $20, $50, $100 for a record, okay, cool. But make sure you know what you're talking about. Make sure you have some knowledge of that record to where you have a legitimate reason for pricing it however you're pricing it. But just to grab something and say, hey, it's this much money just because, it is. And really in your mind, you have no idea of what the value is, but you want to charge a price that you feel like, okay, I can live with selling it for this much, whether it's more value or less value than that. I can live with that. No, that's not going to work with me. And needless to say, I never went back. Their numbers probably in an old phone somewhere. I don't recall, but it ended up being it was a disappointment, and I was slightly annoyed by the whole thing because they weren't prepared, and I know they weren't expecting me. I mean, you gotta. I wish I had pictures or videos of that place, because if a record collector, a record digger like myself, who also is a reseller, walks away from hundreds of boxes of records and I have no idea what's inside of them, then you would understand, or you could understand that it really had to have been a serious situation to make me walk away from that and not even look back. And there's a good chance that I walked away from some great stuff, but I wasn't willing to kill myself just to move all of this stuff around and go through stuff. It wasn't gonna happen. It wasn't gonna happen. So that ended up being, you know, just a terrible situation where it could have been a lot easier. It could have been a lot better. Maybe I would have found some $10, $12 records in there that were worth $10 or $12, or that were worth more than $10 or $12. But I guess I'll never know. I guess I'll never know. So hopefully, they made something out of that place, and I have no idea. I don't know anybody that's ever been there or heard of the place or whatever. And I told people about it, and the people that I informed, they didn't seem to be very, very interested in seeking it out either. So that ended up being like a crappy vinyl experience for me. Now, another experience I want to tell you about. Now, this took place in my hometown of Milwaukee. This was a record store called Great Lakes Records. They were at the time located on 76 and Burleigh. So my old school Milwaukee cats, they know about this place. Now, I think Great Lakes was a great store. When you walked in there, they had a front part of the store where they had what I will describe as their higher value records. And a lot of those records was like so far off the charts, it was ridiculous. I remember that's the first place I ever saw the Michael Jackson Bad 12-inch was in there, and they wanted $50 for it. I was like, you're nuts. You want Michael Jackson 12-inch for $50? Are you nuts? It had the picture sleeve. I had never seen it before. But it was like pricier stuff in there. Then they had like some toys that were behind glass, a bunch of like old rock and roll type toys and memorabilia and stuff like that. But then they had all of their regular records in the back room. It was the front part of the store, and then you had the back part of the store. And then later on, like years after I started going there, I found out that they had a basement, and they had, there was one time I went down there. They had it open up because they never had it open up when I would go in there, and for whatever reason they had it open up, and they had like these little arrows that pointed to, down the steps and where you go, and they had a big huge basement full of records. And I remember I found my second copy of Beastie Boys' License to Ill down in that basement. But anyway, so the second room inside the store, it was a lot of record stores back then. They didn't really separate music by genre. And when they did, it was usually they might have had like a country section, or they had like to my old school cats, you remember like the female vocals section, or the male vocals section, or soundtrack section. Things like that might be separated. But like as far as like pop, rock, um all of that stuff was, R&B was mixed in with that. Jazz was mixed in with that. Like rock and roll, all of that stuff was mixed together. And that's what it would say, pop rock. But everything was in there. That was one of those situations in there. After so long, they would start having $2 sales on Saturday. And that was when it really would pop off great. I mean, you go in there on a Saturday and man, you could find some really good stuff. So, but you had to dig. Unfortunately, they didn't have an R&B section. They didn't have a rap section. They didn't have a jazz section. Not that I was looking for jazz back then. I wasn't. We're talking the mid 90s. So, let's say I wanted let me McFadden and Whitehead album. I just had to look through the M's, and one would pop up. So it was sort of a situation like that. So I used to score big time on those $2 sales that they would have on Saturday. Now, I know some of you might be thinking, well, that doesn't sound like a bad situation. Well, that part wasn't exactly a bad situation. Actually, that was a good situation. This record store was not so much about the merchandise, the actual vinyl. This solely laid upon the record store owner, 1,000%. Now, there was this guy who worked in there, and he was this older guy. I would guess he was in at the time, his 60s, maybe, something like that. And he was one of those really skinny, frail kind of dudes. And he worked in there. He was in there 95% of the time. And then you had the owner. The owner was a guy who looked like he may have been anywhere from mid-30s to mid-40s, somewhere in there somewhere. And he looked like one of those, I don't know, I don't know. He just looked like an average white dude, I guess you could say. Now, I heard that he was a cokehead, but I don't know how true that was or not. But I always remember him being like really, really rude to his employee, that older guy. He's always like just biting his head off about something. And luckily, like I said, I didn't see him often, but I would see him from time to time. So I'm in there on a Saturday, and it's a $2 sale. There's a bunch of people in the store, and it got to the point to where it went from like 10 or 12 people being in there all at once to like maybe 2 of us or maybe 3 of us in there. And I'm in the front. We're all in the front part of the store, and I hear the owner say to his employee, he says, "Why weren't you watching them?" And then the older guy, the employee, he says, there's a lot of people in the store. I can't keep my eye on everybody at the same time. I can't keep my eye on everyone at once. He didn't say it, as aggressive as I just said, but he just said, hey, I'm doing the best I can. There's a lot of people in here. There's a sale going on. And then I hear the owner say, if they would have stole something, you know what I would have done? I would have went out there and I would have kicked there, and then I would have came over here and I would have kicked Joe. And I was just like, let me tell you something. I'm the nicest guy in the world. Trust me when I say that. Mm. I was this close. I was this close to knocking that dude's teeth out. I was so livid. I was just like, it was like this close. And I was like, knock this dude out. Just hit him. Just hit him. Just give him just walk over there and knock him out. And I'm like this close to doing it. And then somebody walks in the front door and it just kind of distracted me. And I was so pissed off that I just walked out of the store. I just walked out, and I was just like, oh golly, man, like that dude came so close. I couldn't believe that was like the first time ever that I heard an adult, because I'm in my like early 20s at this point. I never heard an adult speak down on another adult like that. Outside of like television or a movie. I never seen that, and it ticked me off because it was totally unwarranted. And when I heard him say that, or after the fact, that made me think maybe this guy is on drugs, or maybe this guy's tuned up, or whatever. Anyway, I heard that he had, was like, had gotten strung out or something, and the store, not too long after that, the store closed down. And I was told that they had sold the entire collection to some people that were way out in the suburbs, in Brookfield, which was probably a good, I don't know, 45 minutes at least away from where the original location was in Milwaukee. Brookfield is a real nice suburb that was out there. So one day I took a drive out there. This is way after the fact, maybe like a year later, and I go out there and there's a big, humongous warehouse that was out there. No, wait. Was it? I think no. The guy who was there, he moved it out there. He moved that business out there. That's what happened. And once again, there was a front part of the store, and then there was a big, humongous like warehouse in the back. I mean, just hundreds of thousands of records back there. And that's what happened. So I remember, but like it was like worthless. All the records in there were like worthless. You go and there'd be like, like 10, 15 copies of like the most common Earth, Wind and Fire albums. It was just like bulk, like bulk volume of like records you find in the dollar bins. It was nothing exciting. And I remember that was the one and only time I had ever went out there. And I was told that soon after that the guy had sold the entire collection to like somebody in another country or something, like, and they had closed that part down. I just remember that right now. But that was the one time that I'd ever went out there, and it was a bust. But later on, after the fact, even though they had a lot of stock, the fact that the stock was worthless made it a horrible, experience. But that guy, the owner, the way he treated his employee made it like one of the worst experiences that I had ever had in a record store. And I came this close. To punching this dude. And I shouldn't have even got to that point. I should have just walked out without letting my emotions almost get the best of me, because that wasn't my fight. You know what I mean? That wasn't my fight. And it's been so many times over the years, it don't happen anymore, but where I come this close to getting involved in a situation and then later on finding out that the person that I was defending or attempting to defend showed me in some way, shape, or form that they would not have done that for me if the tables had been turned. So now I just tend to mind my own business no matter what the situation is. Y'all leave it over there. I don't know y'all like that. I'm not getting involved. That's how I am right now. So that's how that whole thing ended. But yeah, he almost got punched out by your boy, and it wouldn't have been a good situation because I'm a lover, not a fighter. You know what I mean? Anyway, luckily, like I said, those are like the only like horrible experiences I've had in vinyl shops that I can recall. I can't think of anything else, but if something else pop up, I'll definitely, let you know. So if you didn't see part one of the worst record store experiences I've ever had, make sure you go check that out right here on my page. And I will see you next time on Daryl DTV. Peace and love.